if I could recommend your listeners an episode that will make them turn off the episode in 5 minutes, it's Sagar, my interview with Vivek Ramaswamy.
Well, that's actually, I wanted to bring that up, right? Because that's
I enjoyed
the thing.
that, by the way. I enjoyed that interview.
That's the thing that I think that captures it so perfectly, because he'll say some things, I have my own critique of ESG, which is that it's just this like corporate fig leaf that isn't actually doing anything. It's like greenwashing, which is a common tactic in the corporate world to make people feel good about this brand when they're actually not really changing and doing anything. But he has this critique of ESG that just is so confusing to me, because it's like corporations shouldn't be taking these social positions. But then on the other hand, I'm not going to do anything about corporate power, and I'm going to create structures so that corporations are actually pushing the social positions that I want. And so, yeah, it's sort of, it does illustrate exactly that dynamic you're talking about, where he can posture as a populist and say things that are incredibly perplexing to me, like I'm going to be a unifier, while also leaning into the most divisive, fraught culture war issues that you can imagine.
Ever. I mean, and it was such a frustrating, look, I'm on your guys' podcast, so I'll just like talk shit. I can't do this on the realignment, and I'm not going to give commentary before the breaking points part we published, but it was just such a frustrating interview, because that interview to me, if I were to basically if I were to take a single interview I've done, go back in time and talk to 2016 Marshall and basically say hey, I'm going to totally unred pill you. I'm totally going to make you not think this is I would play that interview, because that interview is the actual logical culmination of the Trump presidency. Also, by the way, you guys notice, you listen to the interview. Vivek was very squishy when it came to whether or not he would reform Social Security.
Yep.
Oh, he wasn't squishy. He was open to it.
I was trying to be at least a little generous. We all know that he totally would have no problem privatizing Social Security. He totally doesn't believe the Trump position, which I think Trump actually, because we all know this. Trump was kind of he was a Democrat for a long time. I think his pro-entitlement programs, with the exception of Obamacare, which is obviously deeply personal in terms of his hatred of Obama, he's basically retained his Democratic 1990s views on entitlement programs. But Vivek was totally against Social Security. And yeah, the divisiveness part was just crazy to me. The thing, I'd love to hear your guys' thought on this. The thing that I just don't understand, as a kind of reformed politician kid, I was very much into student Congress. In high school, I was youth governor of Oregon. I went to Boys Nation. So I kind of get Vivek's mentality. I get Josh Hawley's mentality. You get the sense that what they want to do every single day is wake up and just fight 50% of the country. That was the only conclusion from watching the interview. My first most important act is I'm going to abolish affirmative action at the federal government level, right? We're not even talking about the whole mainstream of American society. He basically just means when it comes to federal hiring practices, he's going to repeal this program that frankly no one's ever actually heard of. That to me is just the logical culmination. He's not actually waking up saying to himself, hey, I'm a China hawk. If we pursue the policies I believe in, the American domestic political economy is going to be entirely wrecked because we're not ready for decoupling. Our supply chains are totally screwed up. We haven't set up friendshoring yet. I'm not going to focus on that. Instead, I'm going to focus on dunking on amorphous black people, which is obviously what he's actually doing. That was crazy to me.
Or the climate religion, as he calls climatism, which is saying, people who believe in climate change and are environmentalists. It's you guys are part of a cult. Yeah, the thing that bothers me, to your point, is he says all those things and takes all those positions while also insisting I'm pro national unity.
Right.
And it's just don't say that part. Just say the first part, and then at least it's more honest. It comes as advertised. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah,
no, that's exactly it. Oh, sorry, Krystal, please.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, no, and the quick culminating thought is just that, especially on the climatism thing is fascinating to me, because I've done a couple of interviews with kind of this right-wing climate category. And what they've kind of figured out, as opposed to the 2010s, is you don't have to be Marco Rubio and say, well, I'm not a scientist. I don't know whether climate change is real. That was always at a debate level. That was just dumb. Say climate change is real. Global warming is real. and just poo-poo every single actual position someone would take to address that issue. I mean, we didn't get into this during the interview. We only had 28 minutes, but like Vivek's actual position is that we should abolish electric vehicle subsidies. That was an example of climate religion. And once again, we could have a big debate about whether or not we should be subsidizing like Model S's and Teslas and whatever. But like then he has gotten so extreme that a position that Elon Musk of all people supports is an example of climate religion. Like, is Elon Musk a climate religionist? Like it's actually just like totally incoherent and deeply frustrating. And the fact that a 37-year-old who's very smart, is deeply credentialed, is very successful, is ending up with these positions is an example of how toxic I think trying to play 5D chess with like the realignment right can actually be. It's a total disaster.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I took away from it. Was it's like the next evolution of climate denialism. Like the conversation has gotten far enough so that, you know, even a majority of Republicans now say, okay, climate change is real. We should probably be doing something about green energy. Like, these are decent things. And so rather than taking that head on, they're like, isn't Greta Thunberg like a freak and a weirdo? And aren't they so extreme? And I'm not against like dealing with climate change. It's just that these people have turned it into a cult and a religion, which keeps you from having to deal with any of the specifics of the proposal. So as one example, in that interview, he even mentioned something about how like, oh, they're not even in favor of nuclear energy. And it's like, okay, well, there are parts of the, you know, climate focused environmentalist movement that still hold that position. But actually, even Greta Thunberg has shifted on that part. So like, you should be declaring mission, like, yay, congratulations. You came around to a better position on this, one that I support. But they're invested in the straw man and the caricature because it keeps them from having to actually engage in a debate about not just is climate real, but like, what should we actually be doing about it?
No, and I think this is also, I want to go back to Kyle's point around national unity and that gets to this. The reason why I've really enjoyed like working with the two of you guys for a couple of years is it's actually like forced me to not caricature people who I disagree with. Like Vivek is literally, I was going to ask this. I'm like, when was the last time you actually spoke to someone you respect who's like even a degree closer to the left than you are, which is probably just like never. He would count talking to some like lame journalist who asks if he's racist, which is lame when that happens, like, you know, whatever. But he hasn't actually spoken to people. I speak of people I respect, like you two, so that's helped me like think about these things. My perspective of national unity isn't like West Wing kumbaya. I think it's actually just identifying national objectives that we could actually work on. So I think something that the three of us, and like including Sagar, could actually work on is like, hey, like it's really bad that America's like vital pharmaceutical like drugs are dependent on China. We could disagree about Taiwan. We can disagree about like the US like military posture in Asia, but we can agree that, wow, COVID exposed that there's this really big vulnerability. So if Vivek was serious about being like a uniter who's bringing new ideas here, he would say something like, look, I'm obviously on the right. I'm a Republican. There are all these things that Krystal and Kyle like won't agree with me on, but here are these like 5 things that I actually know for a fact I could sit down with Matt Stoller, Krystal, Kyle, Greta, et cetera, and like work on. And that's what actual national unity would look like. It's not everything, but there are 5 things.